Hello friends, Andy C. Luter here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my 5-minute Bible studies. Today I am looking at the Book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verses 11 and following. This particular lesson is entitled, Putting on the Whole Armor of God. Again, I am Andy C. Luter, and on behalf of our congregations, I want to welcome you to this 5-minute Bible study, and it is my hope and my prayer that either something said and or done shall prove to be of spiritual benefit to you. Let me begin here, friends, with this overview of my lesson today. This lesson examines one of the most familiar passages of Scripture in all of the New Testament. It was written by Paul and was intended to encourage Christians to be steadfast in their faith and witness of God in their lives. Now, in addition to that, I want to share with you what I hope you will learn from the time that we spend together. Number one, the historical background of the particular passage of Scripture that I have selected for your consideration today. Number two, the symbolic meaning of each of the articles that is described in this text. And then I want to look at the overall objective of the author. What was the Apostle Paul trying to say to you, not 2,000 years ago, but today? What is the life application of this lesson as it relates to where you are today? Okay, so let's look at the book of Ephesians, and I want to kind of quickly give you some background on this particular book. Of the 66 books of the Bible, it is the 49th of those 66 books. It is the 10th book of the New Testament. Now, we know that there are 66 books in all of the Bible, divided into two major categories, Old Testament, New Testament. In the Old Testament, there are 39 books. In the New Testament, we have 27 books. Now, this book of Ephesians is the 10th of those 27 books that we find in the New Testament. Now, there are 21 epistles found in the New Testament, and this book is the 5th of those 21. And of those 21, the Apostle Paul writes 13 of the 21 epistles, and this book of Ephesians is the 9th book of Paul of his 13 books that he contributes to the New Testament. Now, in addition to that, I want to share with you some other items as it relates to the book of Ephesians. Number one, it was written between the years of 60 to 61 AD. Now, that would be approximately 1 year before the Jewish revolt, the massacre of Masada that would happen 9 years later, the Jewish revolt of 70 AD and the massacre of Masada. So it is written during a time when Jerusalem was on literally a political edge. It was written from Rome during Paul's first visit to Rome while he was incarcerated in the city of Rome. It consists of 6 chapters, 155 verses, and 3,039 words. Now, Ephesians 6 and 11. Let's kind of take a look at the text itself. Put on the whole armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Now, those of you who are familiar with the King James Version will recognize this text as so that you can stand against the wiles of the devil, which is another way of saying the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Now, the Apostle Paul does not stop there, but I want to say that other than Jesus, Paul is perhaps the most popular and powerful character in all of the New Testament. He begins as an enemy of the church, but eventually becomes the chief advocate of the church. You'll recall in the book of Acts, it is described that Paul actually went to Damascus for the purpose of putting Christians in chains. He is knocked off of his high horse. He is taken to Ananias' house. His sight is restored. He is relieved of his blindness, he becomes a follower of Jesus Christ, and eventually he becomes one of the most powerful personalities for the New Testament church in all of the New Testament section of the Bible. Now, in addition to that, let's talk about exactly what Paul says. He says to put on the full armor of God. Notice that Paul advises the reader that there is something that they have to do. You're not born with it or entitled to the armor. He starts with an imperative, a command. Put on the whole armor of God. Nobody can do that for you. It is something that you have to do yourself. The second thing I want to say here is that Paul is very, very clear. He says put on the whole armor of God, not a portion of the armor, not some of the armor, not half of the armor, but what you have to go through will require that you are fully equipped with everything that God has prepared for you to stand against the adversaries that are pitted and dedicated to your demise. All right, let's move on just a little bit further. He says to stand against the devil. To stand against the devil. Paul's theological background makes him familiar with the belief that man is subject to the schemes of the devil. Our overall objective is to stand against what the devil is trying to do to us. Now, we don't retreat, we don't charge. Notice here, the text says stand, which means the rain will come, the storms will come, the wind will blow, enemies will attack, but you need not retreat. You don't have to be aggressive, but the purpose is to stand in the face of adversity. All right, just a little bit more of this text. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Paul is clear in helping us to understand that the struggles of life are not human, flesh and blood, but rather is an encounter with powers beyond the boundaries of this world. Let me remind you that in the story of Job, Job was minding his own business, and he is victimized by Satan with the permission of God. Why? Because God had confidence that Job would be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. In like fashion, God intends for us to stand against the schemes of the demonic that appears in our lives. And notice the conjunction here, against spiritual forces. Against spiritual forces. We are working against two enemies. The first of those two enemies are the systems of this world. Systemic racism, prejudice, bigotry. Those are systems of this world that are aimed at our destruction. The second of the two are the powers of the evil world. We're not locked in a battle just against another human agent, but we are dealing with agents beyond the borders of this world. And then Paul closes by saying, in heavenly realms. Now, I find this somewhat fascinating. The origin of the evil force is heaven, where Satan began, not in hell, where Satan ended up. Let me remind you that Satan began as an angel. He was called the Prince of Light. To stand against Satan means that God will enable us to mount a defense rather than mount an attack. Okay, I'm turning the Conie here and I want to give you an illustration. There is a mammal called the Conie. It is both small, but it is also wise. It is small, but it is also wise. Now, the Conie has no natural defense against foxes and wolves that are much larger and much stronger than the Conie. But the Conie is small enough to hide in small places between the rocks. Predators become frustrated because they cannot gain access to their prey in the rocks. They can see the Conie, but they cannot get to the Conie, because while the Conie does not have natural defenses, it can slip into places where the rocks become their defense. And the fox and the wolf that would eat the coney is unable to do so. They can see their prey, but they cannot get to their prey. In like fashion, we have no natural defenses against the dark, evil forces of this world. But God hides us in the cleft of the rock so that our adversaries can see us, but they cannot get to us. We're hidden by the rock. We're sheltered by the protection of God. Well, in the end, I want to share this with you. We are successful because we are fully dressed, all that the Lord makes available to us in the following verses, like the helmet and the shoes and the breastplate and the shield and the sword. But here's what I want to ask you. What is missing from this wardrobe or this listing of protection that is made available to us? Notice that there is nothing in the list of Ephesians 6 that covers the back of the soldier who is sent into the battle. And why is that? Because God covers our back. We are given tools to defend ourselves against a frontal assault. But when it comes to our back, God protects our back. And that's what I want to close with. God's got your back, friends. No matter what you're going through, what the adversity, what times may look like, God has your back.